Ralph will take us back in time to the nose compartment of a B-17 Flying Fortress as he relates what it was like to have a first-hand view of the war through a Norden bomb site. But first, I would like to take a moment to recognize and salute some of Ralph's fellow World War II veterans who've joined us up here at the front tables today. And I want to thank Dr. George Despotis and his network of folks who were kind enough to drive many of these men out to the airfield today. Let me introduce them. I have Lieutenant Al Brennecke and his wife Dot. Al? Yeah. Al was a navigator on a B-24 with the 8th Air Force. I have Sergeant Vern Edelman, and I believe was his daughter Lisa here today? Okay. Vern was a Bombardier. Staff Sergeant Harris Gerhard, also flight engineer on B-24. Where's he at? Hey. There he is. PFC Bob Guillen, and he, where's he at? Bob, are you here? There he is. Bob was with the 1st Cavalry Army Pacific Theater of Operations. Corporal Vince Hunter, you here today?
No.
No, didn't make it? Okay. Lieutenant Commander Ed Olszewski. There he is, Navy guy. I gotta tell you, I was really stoked up about this all week when I found out. How many people do you know, how many guys do you know that flew Hellcats in the Pacific and the European Theater of Operations? Not a whole lot. This guy did. And I found a picture with a couple of swastikas on your plane. That was really cool. So, and then we have Sergeant, oh no, he couldn't make it, that's right. All right. Thanks guys, thanks. Okay, as we honor and recognize these men for their service to our country, I would also like to recognize 5 future members of the U.S. Air Force who were kind enough to come out in uniform today and make sure that our veterans were taken care of. Please welcome Brent Anderson. Brent, you back there? Stand up, Brent. Camden Denier. Wait, keep standing. Stand up. Stand up. James Garrity. Greg, are you here? Oh, Greg's not here. Tim Roberts?
Nope, not here.
Not here. Okay, who else? I didn't get the name. Go ahead. Go ahead, sir. Didn't have your name, sorry. Thanks, guys. All of these ROTC students are assigned to Det 207 at the University of Missouri St. Louis. Thanks for all your help, and we wish you the best of luck as you begin your military service. I also want to thank Mark Nankiville and Carmelo Turdeau, and also Myron over here, Aero Experience, for obtaining photos and videos of today's meeting. Our dear friend and founder of Spirit of St. Louis Airport, Paul Hagelin, will turn 90 next Saturday. He's still a spring chicken today, okay. So his daughter Alexis and I have been quietly planning a celebration for a few months now. Of course, as a lot of birthdays do, this one had good intentions of being a surprise, but you know how that goes. I want to thank Andy Sharp, who flew Paul over here from Spirit in his beautiful 195 today, sitting right out there, and go look at it. How was that flight, Paul? I witnessed it. It's on film. It's all on film. We'll review that later. Okay. Paul hails from Minnesota, but has had firm roots in Missouri since 1957, when he was hired as a customer service rep at McDonnell Aircraft. This was after 2 years of active duty in the U.S. Air Force, performing airborne research engineering at the Cambridge Research Center, Bedford, Massachusetts. At Mac Air, Paul coordinated the F-101 Voodoo weapon system into U.S. Air Force service, proposed foreign sales to Canada, and assisted Bob Little in presenting the F-4 Phantom to the Air Force. Exactly 59 years ago this month, Paul resigned from Mac Air to pursue the development of what would become the Spirit of St. Louis Airport. We will have to devote a future meeting to cover the entire history of this landmark airport, but Paul, on behalf of all the users of Spirit Airport, over the past 55 years, we all thank you for building such a robust airfield that has grown to nearly 100,000 operations per year and has close to 400 based aircraft and home to over 150 businesses. think what we should do right now is let's sing Happy Birthday to Paul. Can we do that?
Yeah. No.
I'll try to lead it off. See, I got to kind of be lucky today. Oh, hear our name. I don't know. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday, dear Paul. Happy birthday to you. Many more. All right, 75 years ago, World War II was entering its 5th long year, and the men and women of the 8th Air Force had been working with the British government since 1942 to establish bases in England that would support the large bombing offensive to be carried out by units of Royal Air Force Bomber Command and the heavy 4-engine bombers of the 8th Air Force, and would fulfill the January 43 Casablanca Directive, which stated, "Your primary object will be the progressive destruction and dislocation of the German military, industrial, and economic system, and the undermining of the morale of the German people to a point where their capacity for armed resistance is fatally weakened." Indeed, the first bombing mission to Wilhelmshaven, Germany on 27 January 1943 was described by then Colonel Curtis LeMay as dull, with little fighter opposition and inaccurate flak. These missions would not remain this way for long as the Luftwaffe pilots honed their skills at attacking the American bomber formations. The later marked P-51B with its Packard Merlin engine was initially deployed as a tactical fighter with the 9th Air Force, and it was not until December 5th, 1943 that the first escort mission took place. Major General Jimmy Doolittle took command of the 8th in early 1944 and drastically changed the policy that the escorting fighters always stay with the bombers. Now the Mustangs could fly far ahead of the bomber boxes in an air supremacy mode, sweeping the skies for enemy fighter opposition as the bombers headed towards the target. On the way home, they were free to strafe enemy airfields and transport. By mid-year, the 8th had hit a high of 200,000 people, and at peak strength had 40 heavy bomber groups, 15 fighter groups, and 4 specialized support groups. On several occasions, more than 2,000 4-engine bombers and 1,000 fighters were dispatched on a single mission to multiple targets. It is now my distinct honor to introduce a man who was there with the 8th Air Force and flew 35 combat missions as Bombardier in a B-17, including 2 on D-Day with the 728th Bomb Squadron, 452nd Bomb Group, flying out of RAF Beetham Green in England. Born in St. Louis on October 26, 1921, Captain Goldsticker was awarded the Distinguished Flying Cross, 5 Air Medals, the French Legion of Honor, French Jubilee of Victory Medal, and a medal from the Russian government. Please welcome Ralph Goldsticker.
Dan invited me to speak today to you all about my experiences in World War II. I see a lot of my friends here also served in the story. I'm going to tell you my story. They've gone through several of the same things. As a bombardier on a B-17 4-engine bomber flying out of England. That's a B-17. That was the latest model. As Dan said, our object was to destroy Germany's capability of waging war. Our priorities were oil refineries, railroad yards, aircraft plants, and ball bearing factories. I can use a light.
Oh, here, let me get that.
Also, besides us, the fighter that mentioned the P-51s would establish air supremacy over Germany, so during D-Day we would have air supremacy. I don't think that the invasion would have happened as it did without the support of the fighter. Well, let me begin way back. Right after Pearl Harbor, I was going to get drafted. So in March of 1942, I applied for the Army Air Corps. That's the recruiting part of there. There's the other part. And in May of 1942, I took the test to see whether I was qualified. I did pass them. And I enlisted in July 6, 1942, in the Aviation Cadet Corps. I was sent to Jefferson Barracks in for 2 months, did nothing. Peeled potatoes, I guess, and marched and whatever we did. But then after 2 months, I was sent to Nashville, Tennessee, where they'd opened the classification center. And we took board tests, physical, mental, psychological, aptitude tests to see whether you're qualified to be a bombardier, a pilot, or a navigator. Well, I asked to be a pilot. Why? I'd seen movies where Clark Gable and Jimmy Stewart were heroes. I'd never been in an airplane in my life. I maybe saw some land at Lambert Field in the summer when one out was hot and it was cooler out there, and saw one every half hour maybe landing. Go ahead. After Nashville, I went to Maxwell Field, Alabama. It was an old established air base, so we had suites of 6 rather than barracks of 60. Those are my roommates. We were together at Nashville, we were together at Maxwell, and also at pilot school. Someone asked me if I was still friends with them. I said no. Unfortunately, there was 4 in the back row, all were killed in the war. Those are 2 letters I got back from my best friends. One deceased, the other's missing in action. Okay, Bob. I went to Albany, Georgia, from pre-flight for pilot training. That's a PT-17 Stearman biplane. After 10 hours of dual instruction, I had a solo flight. Doing great, coming in perfectly landing, and I thought there's wind coming from the left, so I hit the left rudder and ground root the plane, broke off a wing. I can still see my instructor at the end of the runway throwing down his parachute, and how could a student do that? But he did the same thing the next day, so it wasn't so bad. But after I passed my 20-hour flight check and my 40-hour flight check, I didn't do so well. When the instructor cut the engine, you're supposed to go upwind. I went downwind. So that washed me out. After 46 hours and 2 minutes in the biplane, I was washed out. I did a 10-hour solo, which I still remember was great. I got the measles and was in the hospital for a week. Then I was back to Nashville and said, I want to be a bombardier. Why? I'd seen another movie. Randall Scott and Pat Bryan, they were heroes, so I said I wanted to be a bombardier. Well, I went back to pre-flight for another 6 weeks at Houston, Texas, Arlington Field. And then, because the Bombardier has 2 50 caliber guns in the nose, I went to aerial gunnery school for 6 weeks. After gunnery school, that's the aerial gunnery school. We're flying in the AT-6s, flying at targets at off in the distance, and gunnery school was 6 weeks. Okay, Bob. We went to Bombardier School in Childress, Texas, to learn how to use the bomb sight, the Norton bomb sight. That was our secret weapon in World War II. Flying from anywhere from 27,000 feet, that's 5 miles up, and dropping bombs maybe a quarter, half mile before the target. And that solved the problem of the bombs falling and the gravity. I put in the wind drift and the airspeed of the plane and the altitude, and that would do the rest. We all dropped on it. Well, eventually I'll get to that. Okay, that's a bomb. Bombs are not armed when they're put on the plane. There's the bomb, there's the explosives, there's the detonator, but there's a vein here that doesn't, and that cotter pin holds it in place, so the bomb is not armed until I take that cotter pin out. And once the bomb hits the air, the vein spins off, and the detonator is loose to hit the explosive once it hits the ground. That's one of the cotter pins. Okay, Bob. That was the training plane used for bombardier training, the AT-11. also Bombardier, and I had also 12 weeks of Bombardier training and 6 weeks of navigation training. Okay, Bob. Well, that's me on my 22nd birthday, going to navigation school. Okay. Well, that Bombardier humor. Wrecked the whole town, did you, Willie? Well, I always thought you would. After Bombardier School and Navigation School on the 3rd of December 1943, our last flights, 3 of my roommates were killed. 2 planes collided. I've been with them since Ellington Field through gunnery school. But the 3 of them, and if you know anything about the Army, everything is alphabetical, and there's a gunnery ID in French, so I've been real friends with them all the way through. But I was commissioned on December 4th, 1943, as a 2nd lieutenant in the Army Air Corps. And I was sent to MacDill Field, Florida, where they formed the flight crews. That was my crew, that's a pilot. Joe, I told, was 22, the co-pilot was 20, Hank, the navigator, 25, there I am at 20. And these 3 gunners are all 19. These 2 are a little older. The tail gunner's missing, he was also 19. And that's our escape hatch in case we had to get out of the parachute out of the plane. Okay. Well, there's the B-17G. That's the latest model. The B-17, since it's Historical Society, B-17 was authorized in 1935, and the first ones were delivered in 1939, and 20 of them were sent to the RAF in 1941 under Lend-Lease before we got in the war, and they didn't do well. They were, the armor, they had 5 .30 caliber machine guns. The oxygen didn't work. The heated suits were in series, so it got a nick in any of them and it wouldn't work. And it just, the engines were underpowered at the altitude they were flying and leaked oil. The oil leaked back on the tail surface. It made it hard to fly. And also contrails, which we hated. But the other, finally, the E's and F had the armor which we have now. And the G had the addition of the turret there for 2 50 caliber guns, which I manned. But I had those 2. The top turret had, engineer had 2. The ball turret had 2 50 caliber guns. We had a waist gun on each side, and also the tail gunner had 2 50 caliber guns. Okay. Well, that was my view from the plane. Everyone said, "No, it's a great view." It is until you see that black flap ahead of you, and you fly right into it. But that was my job. Okay, Bob. After we were in Florida for about 4 months, perfecting our bombing skills and our navigation skills and piloting skills, we went to Savannah, Georgia, and picked up a brand new shiny B-17 to take to England. Our first stop was Fort Dix, New Jersey. Well, the co-pilot is from Far Rockaway, New York, which is on Long Island. He called us ahead and said we'd be over in the morning. We were right 100 feet above the rooftops, buzzing right down the main street of Far Rockaway. They couldn't do anything to us. We're going overseas anyway. We went from there to New Hampshire and then into Labrador. Well, the Labrador, our caught a cold, so we spent the next couple of days in Labrador. And from there, we took a night flight from Labrador to Iceland. We were kind of worried because in training, one mission we flew from Tampa to New Orleans and back, and we're over the Atlantic, and the navigator tells the pilot to go 90 degrees, but just straight across the Atlantic. Well, I was sitting in the nose, I know we'd already passed Florida, so we turned around, but we were a little apprehensive about this flight, a night flight, 10-hour flight from Labrador to Iceland, but he hit right on the button. All I remember about Iceland, now it's a tourist place. But they had outhouses, and it was breezy and cold and windy, and they literally froze your ass. From Iceland, we went down to Ireland, and then into Scotland, and finally into England. Okay, Bob. Well, we were based in the 452nd Bomb Group. It was 20 D-17 and 24 bases in this small part of England, and also 12 fighter groups. It's about from Alton down to Festus, and from the river maybe out to Warrington. All those fighters in there, and bombers. Well, that was my Quonset hut. I lived for the next 10 months. Quonset hut held 10 members. We had 2 officer air crews. We also had a medic and a weatherman in our hut. Go ahead, Bob. Well, there I am in front of Deuces Wild with our ground crew mechanic. We were assigned to the 452nd Bomb Group because they lost 14 out of 24 planes over Brooks, Czechoslovakia on May 12th. And we landed about the 13th and 14th. Were assigned to the 452nd Bomb Group, the 728th Squadron, to replace those that were lost. Okay, Bob. Well, it wasn't us that could do it. We needed everybody in the base to get us off the ground. Besides the flight crew, there's 17 other people there, but we also had parachute packers, you need the MPs, you need the bomb, the cooks and bakers, the office personnel, everybody. So it took the whole base to make this ready to fly. Well, on a normal mission, they come in the office, into the Quonset hut, about 2:30 in the morning, and say, Antos crew, you're flying. That was my crew. So we get up and get dressed, go to breakfast, and then we go into the briefing room, and they show us the target. Go ahead, Bob. Well, this is target I flew later on, but we went from the briefing they used the weather, what to expect over the target. This is our bomb run, right from the IP straight and level to the target, and then the rally point and back. Go back with one bomb. There.
Yeah. Oops, sorry.
But after the briefing, we go back, put on our heavy clothes, but before that, we go into separate briefing rooms, and the bombardiers would get blowing up pictures of the target. The navigators would give their instructions to, minute by minute, where they were supposed to be, because we had to meet up with other groups and also the fighters. So we had to be right on schedule. Okay, Bob. Okay, go on. Well, that's showing us going out to the airplane. Okay, and that's how we got in the Bombardier, and navigator got in the plane, crawled in. I don't know where we give his ladders, but we crawled in back there. Now, there's the takeoff assembly, and with all those planes in the sky, we had the pilots adhere to the schedule, otherwise have crash and cloud another plane. There we are right there. We go up and cross the wash. Well, that shows the Bombay. So there's the Bombay. That's the between. Go ahead. That shows takeoff. There's plane there. There's one there. These two collided on takeoff. So we go at the airfield and out to our plane, and after we got on, we're waiting to see if the green flare, the mission was on, a red flare. The mission was canceled. Of course, we're always hoping for the red flare. we take off as green flare, and we assemble above the clouds. They're always going through the clouds in England. And we'd assemble on, our group would make it flying a green flare, another group would have a yellow flare, another one yellow, or green, yellow, whatever it was. It was a tedious proposition. I don't know how we did it, but we did. We get into it, find our group and get in the squadron. We'd fly 18 planes in a squadron. We'd have lead squadron of 6, a high squadron of 6, and a low squadron of 6. So we'd have 18 planes. And also we'd have 180 50 caliber guns to protect us. Okay, Bob. Flak was our biggest problem. Flak is this German anti-aircraft battery. It's an 88 millimeter shell, about 5 inches. And you shoot and it explodes at a preset altitude, your altitude, just where you were by radio and radar. Go ahead, Bob. Well, that's a battery, and they've shot a battery of 4, 88 millimeter. Okay, Bob. Well, that shows flak around the plane. Okay, Bob. That shows flak. All these circles are all flak batteries. You could hardly get into France or even Germany without being shot. We used to go in through the Ziders, the Eurzone, Morschi, and we could get in probably easier. Flak damage. Okay. I'm good. These are a couple of clips, 3 clips from the Memphis Bells 25th mission. I can't actually describe what a mission is, but maybe this would be, there's 3 parts I took, a few minutes out of each of them. First is the takeoff, which I like. The next is in the combat, which you'll see, and then the third is a landing. So this is actually Army Air Force Corps footage, not the movie. Okay, Bob. Those are on some.
Each puff is a shell exploding, throwing shrapnel around the sky. Exactly the range, accurate flak by radio prediction. 5 miles down up, the anti-aircraft batteries have calculated the altitude, speed, and course. Where will the next one hit? You try not to be there. The docks and submarine pens of Wilhelmshaven. Approach to the target dock. No smoke screen can protect it. Now the enemy knows the path of your approach and walls that path with a flak barrage. But you fly right through it. Flak so thick you can get out and walk on it. Morgan changes course every 15 seconds, evasive action to confuse the flak batteries. Bomb sight set for correct altitude and speed. Bomb bay doors open. The bombing run begins. Pilot to Bombardier. Okay, Vin, you got it. Now Evans flies the Memphis Belle, controlling it through the bomb sight. And now we are most vulnerable. Committed to our bombing run, we can't dodge flak or fighters. Here's the first. Top turret fire center. Evans must ignore the battle. Crosshairs lined up on target. Adjustments for wind drift made. 2 more fighters diving from 9 o'clock. Flak now has the range 2. As lead bombardier, Evans' aim must be good. Every other ship in the group will drop its bombs when he drops his. Now one pointer on the bomb site moves toward another stationary pointer. The instant they touch, bombs will release. They touch. Bombs away. Head wound. Concussion. 20mm cannon shell exploded in his radio compartment. Shock. Internal injuries. He'll be all right. Flak burst scattered flying shrapnel. He's full of steel splinters. This pilot's leg is not a pretty sight. Neither are the dots Philip found. These men will all get the Purple Heart. And this man too. A transfusion right in the plane. This gunner is too weak to be moved. The new life-giving blood flowing into his veins might be the blood of a high school girl in Des Moines, a miner in Alabama, a movie star in Hollywood, or it might be your blood, whoever it is. Thanks. 36 planes left this field this morning. Now 6 more arrived. That makes 20 home. And this one's 21. 4 wounded aboard. Coming in with his left inboard engine dead. 23, with the feathered prop on his left outboard engine. 24, southern comfort, with the checkered tail gone. 25, they flew home on their luck. Our losses were heavy, but the enemy's were far heavier. We destroyed a German aircraft factory, a rail junction, submarine pens, docks, and harbor installations. That's specific, known damage. But who can tell the number of German torpedoes that will not be fired, the number of our convoys that will get through now, the soldiers and seamen's lives that will be saved, or the battles that will be won instead of lost, because of what these bombers and airmen did today. Pilot and tailman. They can laugh now. Fire on the inboard engine did this. Flames streaked back and burned the stabilizer too. Here's old Bill. A pretty good airplane when it took off. Lost its nose. Lost its navigator. Bombardier wounded. Top turret gunner, pilot hit. Hydraulic system shot out. No brakes, no flaps. But old Bill came back.
That's part of the Memphis Bill. That's, you just can't describe what you're going through. This is the 50 caliber gun that we used. It's a 20 millimeter that the German aircraft are firing back at us. But in the movie, he talked about evasive action. We did no such thing. We went straight and level for 10 or 12 minutes from the IP of the target. And we all dropped, as I mentioned, on the Bombardier. So we all had to stay on the bomb site in case he was shot down, and we had to take over. Okay, Bob. Well, that's a debriefing. After we came back, they asked us about the target. If we saw a plane going down, whether we saw parachutes coming out, how many, whether we saw trains along the way or ships in the channel, passing information on. They also give us a shot of scotch, so keep us awake, I guess. Then we go back to our Quonset hut, feel happy you survived, till you see 4 empty cots there. The other crew didn't come back, your roommates. Okay, Bob. Well, that shows our waist gunners, how we're dressed. Go ahead, Bob. This is what I wrote home one time that I wore. Long underwear, regular pants and shirt, heated jumpsuit, fleece jacket, fur-lined gloves, fur-lined boots, leather helmet, throat mic, Mae West life vest, parachute, metal flak suit, metal helmet, oxygen mask and hose, cord to the headset, cord to the throat mic, a cord to the heated suit. Also had silk gloves because my other gloves were too heavy and my hand would freeze to the bottom side if I didn't have the gloves on. Also binoculars to help pick up the target, and I had a .45 handgun pistol to destroy the bomb site in case we were shot down. Okay, Bob. That just shows planes on the way to the target. And it shows us dropping bombs. Go down the bomb run. We're so close. The top engineer would say clear above, and the ball turret would say clear below, because it shows a bomb taking the tail off of the plane. So we didn't want that to happen to us. Okay. Well, finally, after we were in England for a couple of weeks, flying around, on May 27th, the group had gone to Frankfurt earlier. They sent a squadron, 6 of us, to St. Valery to a gun emplacement. We took off about 3 o'clock in the afternoon and gone maybe 3 hours over enemy territory for 10 minutes. And well, maybe that's not so bad. But 2 days later, we went to Leipzig. Where Leipzig is. It was a 9.5-hour flight, nearly as far as you can go in Germany. We lost 3 out of 18 planes that day. So I'm thinking, they lost over 50% the day, a few days before, and 3 days out, they're going to fly 25. My next mission was to short-range plant. It was an aircraft plant. We only bombed Reims airfield and bridges right outside of Paris, and then Boulogne on the 3rd of June, right on the coast. Also, the Gatton Battery. Okay, Bob. Well, for 2 years, the Germans, the British had been trying to tell the Germans where we're going to land or not land. They're sending false information. This is part of Patton's First Army. They had airplanes, they had men, they had the tank all rubberized, trying to deceive the Germans because they thought they were going to go to Calais, which is right across the coast from Dover, which is closest. Okay, Bob. On the 4th of June, we were called in briefing about 10 o'clock at night. And we got there and they told us to go back to bed. It was called off. So the next night, well, the clock blocked down the base on the 4th of June. Nobody could come in and out, no mail, no anything. And then at 10 o'clock the night of the 5th of June, we were called in for a briefing. And D-Day was on. We'd been waiting for it to happen, and finally it's going to happen. Well, we took off about 2 in the morning. There's so many planes in the sky. Here we are. We had to fly up to Scotland to come back in 3 bomber streams. This is the 3rd Division, which are B-17s, the 2nd, which is B-24s, and the 1st, which is also B-17s. There are about 1,500 planes there. And go ahead, Bob. Our target that day was a big coastal gun emplacement right in front of the Sword Beach where the British were landing. Well, this is a pin from the first bomb that I took when it dropped on D-Day, on the bombs. And it says, left it 6:58, first bomb out of Deuces Wild on June 6, 1944. After it was cloudy that day, and it broke up right before we got to the target so we could bomb. And we took off at 2, and by the time we got back, it was about 9:30. Then we got fed, they refueled the plane, put more bombs, and we dropped 500-pound bombs in the morning. Afternoon, we took off about 2 o'clock again, and our target was Argenton, which is a railroad junction down there to keep the Germans from bringing supplies forward. And that day, it was clear in the afternoon, and I could see this whole beach about 50 miles from here down to here. And there were 6,000 or 7,000 naval craft in there. Someone said you could walk from England to France with so many ships, and I just about could. But it was a sight to behold. We bombed there. Of course, Omaha is where the big losses were. But when they flew back over the south end of England, every street, every highway, every road was covered with tanks or jeeps and ambulances ready to go. By the end of D-Day, 130,000 Allied troops were ashore. I was in the air 14.5 hours on D-Day, but it was nothing compared with these fellows are meeting on the ground. But the troops dropped earlier. Okay, Bob. It's just planes on the way to the target. Well, on the, go back one bomb. That was on June 6th. On June 8th, we had 1,600-pound armor-piercing bombs aboard. That was the maximum that B-17 could carry. But we had one under each wing, and they were armed on takeoff. So we were worried what was going to happen, because takeoff was always a problem. But we're bombing the bridges at Tours. over the ridges of the river Loire, which cuts right across France. Again, so the Germans couldn't bring supplies forward. Okay, Bob. And after that, went to northern France and went to Bremen Airfield on the 19th of June. On the 20th of June, did an oil refinery at Magdeburg. And then on the 21st of June, we walked in the briefing room. This is what we saw. Here's where we are. We're going to bomb Ruhlin right outside Berlin. Proceeded to Poltava, Russia. But we took off as scheduled. It was an 11.5-hour flight. We bombed there over Warsaw. We hit fighters. You can see them coming off the ground. They're only about 8,000 feet there, and they hit us about 30 minutes later. But the group behind us knocked 2 planes down. But we proceeded on to Poltava. We landed about 6:30 after 11.5 hours in the air, and our tents were right on the edge of the airfield. And we lined up. Let me read some of these orders. A supply of toilet paper is suggested. Officers will wear pink slacks, a blouse for wear except when working. It's wool uniform. Going to Russia, they thought it was cold. But this is what gets me. Each individual will consider himself a committee of one to assure that nothing occurs to make the American officer or enlisted man look cheap, shabby, or uncouth in the eyes of the local inhabitants. Well, we lined our B-17s up 48 of them wingtip to wingtip on edge of the runway. In England, they're dispersed all over the field. Okay, Bob. Well, that's where we bombed on the way to Poltava. Okay. That's where we were. That's Poltava. We had another base at Mirgorod, a bomber base, and then at Puritan, there was a fighter base. Go back a couple, Bob. Our original plan was to go from here. The next day, when we got refueled, go on the Eastern Front, help the Russians, and then go into Italy or into Africa, and then from Italy back to England, triangle bombing. Well, it didn't work out. About midnight, there's a bright flash, just like daylight. And the Germans proceeded to bomb the air base for the next hour. 100 bombers kept coming and coming. But we were prepared. We just took off from running away from the airfield. And finally found a slit trench. Well, the Russian family's already in there, so I slid right in with them. And stayed with them until the bombing stopped about an hour later. Fortunately, at night, before I got off the plane, I took my escape kit with me, so I'll talk about that a little bit later. I went back that night. This is what was laying on my cot. A piece of German bomb burned through the top of the tent, right into my blanket. It's heavy. Right, I wasn't around. Okay, Bob. That's what we woke up to the next morning. 47 of the 48 B-17s, just tails and engines, all that's left. The Square Group is one of our planes. So we're stranded in Russia. The next day I wanted some of us to go to Mirgorod to help the bombers up there. So I went to Mirgorod, which is about 60 kilometers away, and just spent the next few days helping them reload the bombers. They weren't bombed that night because it was cloudy, so we were the only ones that took the beating. Okay, Bob. Well, after 2 weeks,
Your pocket?
there it is, okay. The Air Transport Command sent planes in for us. The first night went from Poltava down to Rostov and landed at a Russian airfield, and they were very friendly. We sang songs and entertained them. In fact, the only time I fired my .45 was at that night we had a shooting contest with their pistols against mine, and well, it hit the target. But anyway, next morning, or that night at dinner, after entertaining, ordered a glass full of vodka. So next morning for breakfast, another glass full of vodka. A little high before we went high. But anyway, we went from there trying to go into Turan. But Turan is clouded in, so we had to stay in Puritan, a little town there, Armstrong. All I remember about that, they had beds and mattresses were about a quarter-inch thick and on top of sawed and half logs, and my knees kept going right through the mattress all night long. Survived. Next day we went into Turan, and we were stationed on the edge of Turan on the airfield. As I mentioned earlier, I did bring my escape kit. We always had an escape kit, which included Dutch money, Belgian money, and French money. And in this case, they also gave us 50 American dollars. So we were on the edge of the airfield. We walked into town, and the first hotel we found was a bar. We spent my $50 drinking it away. So we were talking, and the captain came up and said, "Shut up, this is neutral territory," and they thought the German spies around us probably were. So anyway, I remember going back, we went swimming in their reservoir. It was so high. The reservoir, Turan was a big town, but on the edge it was very rural, and the water used to come down the gutters, and you see a cow drinking here, but farther down the stream there'd be a family getting water for their house. But anyway, that's how I remember Turan. From Turan, we refueled in Iran. It was hot, I remember. We got off the plane but here we are in wool clothes in the 1st of July, I guess it was by then. And then we went into Cairo. From Cairo, we went into Tripoli, and then to Casablanca. We're supposed to catch a plane next day for England, but we didn't show up. We met some naval aviators that night, and we were having a good time. So next day we didn't show up. The following day, they didn't get on that plane or else. So the 4th day we did. But when our stay there, we tried to buy some souvenirs with the French money they gave us, our escape kit. The escape kit, besides money, had a knife and a file and a compass, and we had Benzodrine tablets. This is the map. This is the map of the territory you're flying over in case you can escape. But anyway, we're trying to spend the French money, and they called the MPs on us. So we had occupied money in Casablanca, in France, so they didn't do anything. So we flew back to England. Got back to England after about 3 weeks gone. Well, this is a short snorter note. I don't know if you guys know what it is, but it's money collected when I was in service, and also an autograph. But in that trip, I spent dollars and pounds and rubles and francs, some there and piastros. We also have some Canadian money on here and some pesos and autograph from Hollywood stars of the 1940s, which my kids had never heard of. Maybe Sally Rand they heard of, that'd be the only one. Okay, well, that's our identification. Oh, this big card in Cairo, that was our translation card. That's some Russian money, and that was my trip from Turan back to the UK. Okay. My first flight back after was to the 14th of July, was to drop supplies to the French underground. And it's on the map down here, I don't know if you can see it. But we crossed the coast, as we generally do, at 10,000 feet. And instead of climbing, we start letting down. And when you form your groups, if you can't find your own group or squadron, you go attach yourself to another group. But we had canisters for the underground to drop at about 2,000 feet. And we get down and down, except we had a strange bomber with us. He had regular bombs aboard. But we got in touch with him, he did not drop. But after I got back from Russia, I flew 11 missions in 17 days. That was the first one. one is the Stuttgart. Here's Stuttgart. That's Stuttgart. That was at the Daimler Benz plant on the 18th of July. Bombed Schweinfurt. That was a ball bearing factory. July 20th, an instrument factory. We lost 17 planes that day at Wetzlar. And then on the 21st, we had Rickettsburg. That's about as far as you can go. That's a picture of the bombing at Rickettsburg. We only lost 4 planes that day. Success. Okay, that's our position on July 25th, 1944. This is 7 weeks after the invasion, and our troops had only gone 20 miles inland. There are over 1 million Allied forces in there stuck. They can't get through the hedgerows of France. So on the 24th, they sent out, it was cloudy, so the mission was recalled. But on the 25th, the entire Air Force bombed right in front of our troops to break them loose. We dropped 100-pound bombs, and remember, we were told Patton didn't want 500-pound craters there was tanks to go over. So we disrupted their communications and their morale with hour after hour, these planes going over. And it was the 25th, and a month later, Paris was liberated. Merceburg. Go ahead. Go back one. There we go. This is also Merceburg the next day. This is our squadron. So I could have been in one of these 2 planes. I know I wasn't that one. But that's Merceburg. Okay. On the 31st of July, we were about 27,000 feet over Munich. And 10 seconds after the bombs were released, a burst of flak burst right under us. A piece of flak came through the bottom of the plane. The pilots sat on armor plate seats, maybe a 1/4 inch thick, went through there, went through our co-pilot's left thigh, way up on the thigh, and out the roof. And we had over 70 holes in the airplane. Well, we were in a flak area, so Marty said he was hit, so I got our first aid kit and went up and gave him a shot of morphine and gave him sulfa. And then I had to get back to my guns because we were getting attacked by fighters. But at 27,000 feet, 40 degrees below zero, his blood froze as it came out. So that saved him. And we were being attacked by fighters. Of course, we lost 2 inches also, and you can't keep up the formation. And you're a sitting duck, literally. So fighters were several hundred, I guess 1,000 yards away when our P-51s came and drove them off. So we were out of the flak area and we were being attacked, and we were losing altitude as Marty started bleeding again. So the last 3.5 hours, I held my hand on the upper thigh to keep the blood from coming out. It was too high to put a tourniquet on. We tried to go there's Munich into Switzerland, but it was fogged in all the way down. So we went back to our base and across the channel, maybe about 1,000 feet. We threw out everything we could along the way to lighten the load so we could make it, and we did. This is a note. I just got a letter from Marty. He said he's going to be in a cast on his heads from his chest to his toes, and he thought he'd walk in about 2 years. Well, he was wrong. It took him 4 years and 22 operations before he could walk again, but he did survive. In fact, he used to call me about every 6 months. His wife wouldn't let him talk about the war, and he wanted to talk, so he'd call me. And one time he was talking about he went into the VA to get some special shoes because of his limp. He lost bone in his thigh. And told the girl, I want some special shoes. Said, what do you need them for? Said, well, a shot went flying over Germany. He said, what were you doing there? It's funny, or it's sad, but that was his comment. I want to read this, it's crazy. I was pretty good about writing home. But this is what I wrote one day we went to rest home first, right after this, for a week, where we lived like civilians. We had civilian clothes on, played tennis, bicycled, went to town, did everything. Even had tomato juice in bed in the morning. In places like Downton Abbey, they enjoyed it. But we were there for a week. And this is what I wrote one day. Today we devoted this energy to making fire bombs and tossing each other's bed. We started by throwing matches at each other. It gradually got worse on each side, using new weapons. We made paper planes, put lighter fluid on them, and flew into the other beds. A lot of such things. It's a good thing our blankets don't burn that very easily. But we were flat happy. I mean, they just were. Okay. Then August 26th, the 24th, that's Brest. Our army's being held up, taking Brest, so we bombed right in the German troops there. One of the few tactical times we did. Okay. And then on the 24th, 2 days before that, I went back to Rouen, the oil refinery. On 26th of the Brest, and then northern Italy, railroad yard, not northern Germany, on August 27th. Then they broke up our air crew. They sent everyone home. They needed pilots and not bombardiers and navigators. Earlier when I went overseas, we had to do 25 missions, and right before D-Day they raised it to 30 because they were losing too many crews and they couldn't send them home. And then after D-Day, raised it to 35 because we weren't having the Luftwaffe attacks that we had earlier. We were only got 8 times by the German fighters. But after they broke up the crew, I flew 25 missions in 2 months, and it took me 2 months to fly the next 10. But these are the ones I flew as a replacement with new crews. On September the 8th, went to Dusseldorf. There's Dusseldorf. That was the aircraft factory. On the 10th of September, went to Nuremberg. And I was with the new crews. Bombardier was their second mission. We had 2 engines shot out on the way into the target. We were about 100 miles west of the Rhine, and our orders were we could not drop bombs west of the Rhine because Patton was moving, we didn't know where he was. So we flew on 2 engines into the Rhine, and I found the brick building on the east side of the Rhine and dropped 3 bombs on it, turned around, came back, and dropped the other 3. And if it had our crew, we would have gone into Paris, but this is our second mission, so with only 2 engines left, we lived home, again throwing everything out. And we got back to England. We had time to cross the coast, maybe a couple thousand feet. But it's the only time we lost 2 engines. We lost 1 other times. Okay. Then on September 27th, went to Mines. There's Mines. I asked not to fly that day. It was Yom Kippur, which is the holiest day in the Jewish calendar. And I asked not to fly, but he came in at 2 o'clock in the morning and said, "You're flying with so-and-so crew." And okay. I prayed all the time, but I prayed extra that day, all day long. But I got home. Then on the 30th of September, went to Bielefeld. As a navigator that day, we hit a railroad yard. And then on the 2nd of October, went to Kassel with ordnance plant. And then on my 34th mission, which was 6th of October, go ahead, Bob. Berlin. Well, that's the most heavily defended city in all of Europe. And I knew I was going to die every day, but this time I was sure. But we went in and dropped bombs. Normally, after I dropped the bombs, the navigator and I get back to back. with our flak suits. It gives better protection. That day, I thought, what the hell, might as well. My state knows watch the bombs go all the way down to the ground. And here I am. This is a report on the raid. 17 B-17s were lost, 1 damaged beyond repair, 234 were damaged, 3 airmen were killed, and 15 were missing in action. Then 3 days later, on the 9th of October, I flew my 35th mission to mines. And this is what I wrote. Today was a big day. I flew number 35. It's impossible to tell you what a wonderful feeling it is to be finished. Maybe tonight I'll get a good night's sleep for a change, knowing I won't be shot at tomorrow. And then of the 40,000 Americans killed in the air operations during World War II, the 8th Air Force alone lost 26,000 airmen who were killed. Another 18,000 were wounded. 21,000 were shot down and became prisoners of war. The 8th Air Force suffered the highest casualty rate of any of the armed forces. The casualty rate I was flying was about 80%. I was one of the 5 that came home. Okay, next. I was afraid to come home because they were retraining us for B-29 flights over Japan. So they built me for awards officer, so I applied for the job and there I am. But the staff, we kept records of every airman flight, the duration, where they went. We were talking like 300, 400 men at a time, and every day they were flying, plus awarding. Okay. After I got home, I came home in March of 45. A letter came down, if you were with the group when the war ended, you had to stay. Well, I didn't want to stay there, so I came home. And I went to Santa Ana, California Rescue Recuperation, and went to Bombardier Instructor School in Midland, Texas. I was there when the E-Day came along and happened. We didn't celebrate, we were still at war. And then I was a bombing instructor for French cadets in Big Springs, Texas, when the war ended. And that night in Big Springs, everybody had walking down through the bottle. This guy had a scotch, bourbon, rye, gin. We're taking a sip out of it. The whole town was drunk. I had to get a cab to get my roommate back. He really passed out. We threw him in the shower to try to sober him up. But anyway, that was the end of that. We did celebrate. Okay. Well, these are the medals I was awarded. This is the Victory Medal. We all got that. This is the Distinguished Flying Cross. That was me when I was flying. I was promoted to captain during Korea. That's an air medal. I received that 5 times. That's a medal from the Russian government for the help of Mirgorod. This is the, oh, there it is, the French Legion of Honor. This is also from France, the Jubilee of Liberty. That was a European theater. I had that with 5 battle stars. That's from Korea, that's from Missouri. That was our presidential unit citation, and that was my gunnery badge at Aerial Gunnery School. Well, that's me receiving the Legion of Honor at the French Embassy in Washington, D.C. nearly 5 years ago now. This was created by Napoleon. It's the highest honor that France can bestow upon those who have achieved remarkable deeds for France. And from Russia, on behalf of President Boris Yeltsin, the Russian government, and the entire Russian people, I'm pleased to inform you we have been awarded the commemorative medal, the 50th anniversary of the victory in the Great Patriotic War. Okay, Bob. Oh, I put this in, it was in the Post-Dispatch the next day, and nobody talked about the war. I didn't. I played cards with guys. My best friend was a bombardier. We never talked about it. Socialized people were the prisoners of war. One of my best friends I played until last year, prisoner after the Battle of the Bulge. We never talked about the war. Never. So one lady, the Maryland man of the Oasis, asked me to speak to her group if she saw this in the paper. So I did. And then I spoke to NARC, which I belong to, and several other people asked me to speak, and I've spoken at several libraries. But invariably, people come up and say, my uncle, my grandfather, my cousin was World War II, and we didn't even know what he did. Nobody talked about it. I didn't, even with my kids. The only thing I ever told them was about the Nuremberg, where I bombed that red building. I said it was a bakery, and now they make pretzels. That's the only talk we did. We just didn't talk about it. And I can still hear that from people. Okay, Bob. Well, somebody asked me if we had fun on, but we did. That's when our cadets. Go ahead, Bob. No, that's Mark. Gunner give me a haircut in England. Okay. Well, I put this in. The whole war, the whole country was at war. It wasn't just us. When I dropped 10 500-pound bombs in a 1,000-plane raid, that's 10,000 bombs in one day. And we're turning out bombers, destroyers, carriers, ambulances, everyone was working. Rosie, the riveters, all the men that were for everybody. Of course, you all know about the rationing all, but this last time, the whole country was at war. No cars were made, no houses were built. So everybody was doing their part. Okay, Bob. Well, that was me as I was first commissioned. Okay, Bob. Well, that's the list of my mission. But I was only one of 16 million that served. We all did our job, and it took all of us to win the war, and we did. Unfortunately, we're still fighting other wars, but we did our part. So that's my story. Thank you for listening to me.